Mistfall. Mistfall is a fantasy quest type of game. It's a cooperative, also solitaire-friendly game, which to me is always a bonus, because if a game has a solid solitaire option, well, then I simply get more chances to play it. And also, as you know, if you watch my videos, I really like fantasy games, and I really like fantasy quest games. I just like the idea of controlling archetypical characters, traveling mysterious exotic lands, and facing enemies, collecting treasures, advancing, leveling up, etc., etc., etc. There's just something deeply archetypical for me about this. I don't know why it resonates so deeply with me, but it is a type of genre, a type of experience, a type of architecture that I thoroughly enjoy. And so I very often play games of this type. Recently played a game in this category called Gloom of Killforth. I seem to enjoy it less than the people did. I'm very glad that people are enjoying Gloom of Killforth. I found it a little too luck-based for my taste, a little too similar to Talisman in a sense, as I explained in my main video for that game. Mistfall. Well, at this point, I didn't know what to expect. I was hoping to find a game that was, somehow resonated better with me, that was more to my liking, since the general idea seemed to be, well, very similar to what, for example, I found in Gloom of Killforth, but also very similar to what I find in a lot of other fantasy games, a lot of other fantasy quest games, which I'm not saying as a negative. I'm saying, of course, as the paradox of the hobbyist, the paradox of the aficionado, who wants to always go back to a certain genre to find the things that he or she liked in the genre to start with, and also wants to find something new. So the fact that the Mistfall seems similar to other games to me was not a negative, because I like those other fantasy games. I wanted a game that gave me that fantasy quest feel, while of course also having, in some sense, in some regard, something new and innovative. Let me show you how Mistfall works. It's a game that is not that hard once you figure it out, but it feels a little fiddly, it feels a little convoluted the first time that you approach it, and possibly also the second and the third. I'll do my best to try to explain at least the basic concepts, but again, it's a game that has many moving parts to it and may sound more confusing and fiddly than it actually is once you start grokking it. So I want to give you a general sense for the game plays, and then we'll talk about it in general. Is this the great new fantasy quest game that I was looking for, or at least a new, solid, strong iteration of the genre? We'll talk about this in the conclusions of my video. The play area changes depending on the scenario that you are playing, but more or less it may look like this, with a location face up indicating the starting area of the party, a party token, and a destination area, and most of the other terrain tiles in play being face down, covered in mist, and when you travel to them or when you use a scouting action, then you flip them face up and you see if they have some special effects, in which case those are described here at the bottom. The restoration value, which is how many points you get to get back, how many health points you get to get back when you rest in that area, stuff like that. So as the game proceeds, the players will flip at least some of these tokens face up. The locations may be safe when they do not have any blood token on them. They may be perilous, and the default position when you discover a new area is perilous, so you flip the tile face up and you place one of those tokens there. They may also be overrun in special cases. You don't want that to happen. You want to resolve the negative encounters that happen in an area to remove the perilous token and make the area safe. But before we get to what happens here, we need to learn a little bit more about some general concepts in the game and about our characters, about our hero. The game has a quest charter here with two main tracks. Well, with a player aid here, reminder of what happens during an encounter, but two tracks. One is the time track, as the players perform actions. They will spend time on the board. At the end of each turn, you draw a time card, which may generate some effects, but also at the top, as you can see from that icon, the time card will move the token on the time track by a number of spaces. If the time token gets to the end of the track before the players have completed the mission of the scenario, the players lose the game. Also, there are certain actions and other circumstances that will move this token here on the reinforcement track during the reinforcement phase, which is the beginning of a turn. After you possibly add more spaces, more movement to this track, then you look at the number that is in the place where the reinforcement token is. You add that number of enemies to the quest area, that is to the game, and then you move this guy back there. That's for the general game charter. Each player then also has a charter, such as this one, or I should say each character, because it's entirely possible that you may have a player running multiple characters. Why not? For example, when I play the game solo, I usually use 2 characters. Each has his or her own unique image, set of skills, special abilities described here. Restoration, which is the number of health points that you recover when you rest. You add that together with the restoration value of the area, and that's how many points you recover. A lot of different characters here. The Frost Mage that makes magical ice cream and blizzards, the Archer type, the Magician, the Wizard, the Seeker, sort of like the Rogue character, Rogue/Warrior, the Cleric, the Big Tank. And here you have a different tank, a very interesting tank. I really like this character. She has this Barbarian that does all sorts of acrobatic things with her 2 axes. So you have your charger that describes some of the special abilities of the charger and has this very interesting track here, which is the enemy focus track, which means when you perform certain actions, you will make yourself an attractive target to the enemies. You will make yourself conspicuous. So when you perform certain actions, you will move this token up on that track. Then when enemies arrive on the play area and they need to be assigned to individual heroes, they arrive in the quest areas and then you assign them to individual heroes. Well, they will go to the hero that has the highest number. For example, suppose that right now she has 5, and suppose that this guy has 8. By this guy, I mean this guy. And these are the only 2 heroes that we have in play. Then we assign an enemy card to this guy, and after we assign an enemy, we have the enemy focus value. So now the next enemy goes to her, we have the result, and so on and so forth, until all enemies have been assigned or all the heroes are down to the basic, have used all of their enemy focus. So very interesting idea here, because the more you do, the more danger you will have to face. And how do you perform actions? By using cards. You have certain gear cards that once you play them stay in your active area. You have a deck of basic actions, and there are some icons. The hand icon is what you look at when you're playing a card from your hand. Certain cards may also have a different icon, which now I can't find to save my life. Here it is. Here it is. There you go. Of course. H means when the card is in the hero area. And again, that is an action you can perform when the card is already placed down in your hero area. For example, here you spend a fast action when the card's in your hand to put the card in your hero area. And also you move the token on that track by 1. Because again, here is you see here, the cost of that action in terms of enemy focus. So, but how do you and when do you perform actions? Well, during the turn, first you have the reinforcement phase, which is when new enemies are added to the play area. The travel phase, in which the players may be able, or may not want to move on the board that I showed you earlier. Then you have the pursuit phase, which is when you assign enemies to individual to individual characters, as I explained earlier, using the enemy focus track, and then finally the players get to perform their actions. During a hero turn, you can perform any one regular action and any number of fast actions and reflexes. Reflexes can also be played out of turn, pretty much. They're what in other games is called a reaction. You can play them whenever the condition described in the reflex text applies. So for example, for my regular action this turn, for her, I can decide to resolve any one action on any X card in my hero area. If that action deals any damage, I add +2. So basically I use this card to give me a +2, because I use this card with a +2 to activate an attack from here. The attack deals 2 points of damage, so because of that now I have a +4. And maybe then I can also use a fast action from another card, or multiple fast actions to have multiple attacks, other type of tactical advantages, taunt an enemy, recover, all sort of things. And this is really the heart of the game. Figuring out how to chain off your effects to create powerful combos is what the game is all about. But now, what are the dangers that we're facing? The enemies, the monsters, the situations. Well, first we have encounter cards. When we get to a new area, we draw an encounter, and we check that the keyword there matches the area in which we are, and we keep drawing until if we're in a green area, we find a card that has a keyword that matches it, if we're in a blue area, and so on and so forth. This gives us the general parameters of the encounter. The first thing is the number of enemies to be found there. That little symbol there with the helm of the armor means number of players. So here we have, and this symbol means enemies. So here we found the number of enemies, which is 2 times the number of the characters. Again, that's the players. 2 times the number of characters plus 1. With 2 characters, that'd be 5. Are there any special rules? Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. Progression, which is what happens each turn. In this case, we place a token, an objective token, for each enemy that leaves play. And here we have an end condition, which is what needs to happen when to end the encounter, which in this case means either the number of objective tokens on the card is twice the number of characters, or we kill all the enemies. Also, we may decide to get out of an encounter before we reach the end, before we meet the end condition, but in which case we have a penalty, which in this case is a time penalty. So this tells us pretty much what we need to do to end the encounter, and also how many monsters we need to get, and again, what are the special rules that may apply to the situation. Depending on where we are, depending on the type of monsters that we have, we will use a different deck. There are 3 decks, which are red, blue, and green. And frankly, I never knew that I was colorblind. I played hundreds, if not thousands of games without ever thinking that I was colorblind. But when I read in the rulebook that one of these decks is blue and the other one is green, I really had a hard time because, well, neither of them looks green to me. This one looks light blue and this one looks on the purple side. It turns out that actually this is green and this is blue. So I use tokens. So for the first time, I use tokens to mark the color of the decks, otherwise I wouldn't be able to tell them apart. But maybe I'm not colorblind because I can tell the color of those two. But the backs of those 2 decks are very similar. As you can see on this side, this is regular green enemy. And here on this side you have this lilac color and you have regular blue enemy. So this doesn't look blue to me. That doesn't look blue to me. So there's something here that's a little off in the production when it comes to the colors. But still, depending on the location, the encounter, we're gonna draw enemies. So we're gonna create the line of enemies in the middle of the area. And then, again, we're gonna go around the table and assign them to our characters depending on how much focus they have, reducing their focus until we have assigned all enemies. And then at that point we have to deal with the enemies. So that is when we take our turn. I said we perform those actions, 1 regular action, possibly many fast actions and reflexes. What we're trying to do is to get rid of these pests here. We are trying to inflict a number of wounds which is equal or higher than their health. we also need to get past their defense. This is their defense against melee, against physical attacks. This is their defense against magic, and this is how much damage they give, plus your keywords that may interact with certain effects and other special rules that may apply. For example, this numbers within a circle mean range. 1 means within your own play area, 2 means pretty much anywhere else, but this one requires an extra range to target. This enemy here has other abilities. For example, it adds stats for each situation. Is whenever a player buries a card, bury means that you lose a card. This is a very interesting mechanic, because what happens here? Again, during your turn, you're trying to inflict hits on them using cards, using attacks, using special effects, etc., etc. And suppose that during our attack we have killed this guy, and we have wounded this guy, but then whoever is still there during the enemy phase gets to attack us, and that is how many damages they inflict on us. How do you record the number of hits that you receive? By discarding cards. This is a brilliant mechanic, I think. By placing cards in your burial pile, which is simply an area that must not be confused with your discard pile. You can take cards from your hand, from your deck, or from your discard pile even. And suppose that, ouch, I took 2 ones and I decide, and this is my hand, and I decide that to absorb the 2 ones, I'm gonna bury, that is to kill that card and that card. There are effects that allow you then to take those cards from there back into your deck, but the idea is that they're out of play for the time being. And that's how you keep track of wounds. It's a very nice idea rather than using tokens, etc., etc., because it reduces your abilities, it reduces your possibilities in a game-wise significant ways. You have to figure out ways that do not ruin some of your combos, do not deprive you of the best actions, etc., etc., etc. Better than in other games in which your health may go down, but you're still able to do exactly all the things that you would be able to do otherwise. Another way, by the way, of replenishing your deck, or I should say to increase the number of cards in your deck, which will also counteract the effect of wounds, is to get new cards. Super important. The equivalent in this game of leveling up. When you kill an enemy, you gain a number of resolve points. I should say the group gains a number of resolve points in their general pool of resolve tokens, and they can be used to buy advanced cards. The cost is there. Each player has a unique deck of advanced feats that simply allow you to do much better stuff. Feel free to pause and read the text to get a sense of the improved things that the characters can do when they add these cards to the deck. So actually, sometimes there are times in which I don't want to necessarily heal one of my wounds when I have some really good cards in my deck, and I'm okay if some lower level cards are there buried, and so my deck is a little more efficient than otherwise. I may also be able, when you win an encounter, you also get rewards, which are magical items, maybe unique cards at the beginning of the game. Each character comes with a unique reward gear, or with several unique reward gears. At the beginning of the game, you take one of them randomly and you shuffle it into the reward deck together with the generic other magic items you may get. So after an encounter, you draw those rewards, and if you can get your personal reward, even better, because that's more powerful than a generic reward. But I would say this is pretty much the general idea. Summarizing, at the beginning of each turn, you add new monsters to the area if the situation applies during the reinforcement phase. Travel phase, the heroes may travel in the world of Mistfall. Portrait phase, the enemies that are in the general area are assigned to individual players. The heroes get to perform their actions, usually trying to kill the monsters to get rid of the monsters that they just received, or they're still there from previous turns in the encounter, before the enemies get to react. After the hero phase, the heroes have to defend because the monsters attack and inflict damage. Then you have the encounter phase, in which you determine whether or not the conditions of the present encounter are are met, are satisfied, and the encounter is over. And then you have the time phase when you draw a time card and you advance the time situation. The game continues until the players have completed their mission, which usually means to defeat the big bad guy that is waiting in the final area and the final location of the game, or until the heroes lose the game. This may happen in one of several ways. Maybe time ran out, in which case the players lose the game. Also, if any one of the heroes dies before the party reaches the final destination, the party loses the game. The heroes also lose the game if all of them die when they are in the final destination. So when the final destination is okay, if everybody dies but one, you still win the game. And that's how you play Mistfall. I like Mistfall. I like it a lot. I think it's a very strong design. I wish the rulebook was done a little bit better. The player aids and the icons from time to time also presented some problems here and there. There's a player aid that doesn't fully match the rulebook or vice versa. And then there are just so many icons, so many effects that from time to time you will have to talk to your fellow gamers and make judgment calls, make decisions, create interpretations that work for you and for your group. And maybe after a couple of games you'll discover that you played a variant, but who knows, as long as your interpretation of the rules work for you, then what's the problem? Who would get hurt? So there is the fact that the game is not all that user-friendly, especially as you're starting to play the game and you're trying to teach it to yourself and to your friends. But once the game gets started, actually things start coming together pretty well, feeling quite fluid and intuitive. I mean, you just have to keep in mind the basic idea. I'm traveling to a new location, hordes of monsters are coming to attack us, we have to defend ourselves. And then repeat in the next area. Bad stuff may happen, a lot of specific unique circumstances may occur, which is what really increases the complexity of the game and makes it look again more complex, more fiddly than it actually is. When you think that the core idea is pretty basic, pretty standard almost, but I think is well implemented. It has a lot of flavor, it has a lot of interesting thematic elements, and it has a lot of interesting decisions. I complained recently again about Gloom of Killfort that seemed too lack-paced to me, and Mistfall was a really nice change of pace because it seems to have a fairly limited amount of luck, or I should say, there is luck, of course, and randomness in the way the monsters are coming to attack you. Well, are coming out of the deck, because actually as they're coming to attack the players, that will be a result of how many actions and which type of actions you took early on, so how much attention you attracted as you were performing your actions. So still, that is something that is a result of decisions that you made. And when it comes to your decisions, this is a deck building game that I really would say takes the things that I like about deck building games and without getting saddled with the things that I don't like. What I like about deck building games, of course, is the variety, the customizable element that I can decide to build my deck as I go. I can decide as things change to go one way or another, specialize in one ability, get one skill, etc., etc. To me, it's much more exciting than deck selecting, in which you select your deck before the game starts and then you're stuck with it. But depending on where I'm going, well, people are getting slaughtered by those monsters. Maybe the cleric needs to get a little more healing rather than more attacks. Someone else, is getting in trouble. Then maybe the guy that has range attacks will get more abilities as they build their deck to be able to support other people. In other cases, they just may be concerned with defending their own area. So I really like the deck building element, which you have here. But then something that I do not like about many deck building games is the complete huge randomness. I get this card that I really, really want, and I may never see it again, or it may come in my hand in who knows how many turns. I've been shuffling, and reshuffling my deck until I almost got carpal tunnel. You do not get to reshuffle very often here, and you get a good degree of control over your deck. Recently I played another deck building game, Time of Crisis, in which you simply get to select your hand. You build your deck and then you create your hand. Mistfall is a little more traditional in this, but it still gives you a lot of effect in which you can manipulate the deck, stack your deck, put cards on top of your deck, or at the bottom in a certain order. So it really gives me just that hint of randomness that makes things interesting, that makes things spicy, gives me that uncertainty here and there, while giving me overall enough control that I'm actually interested in creating a good deck, in stacking a good deck, in giving a certain direction to my deck. So it is a game that gives me the customization options of deck building games with enough control on my deck that I feel that my decisions when I was customizing my deck really matter, and I get to use the resources that I bought. To me, this is huge. Again, the deck will never be too thick, and but no, it won't be deterministic. You don't get full control, but enough control to give this game to me quite a strong personality, while retaining also that element of uncertainty. And yes, there will be the time in which, gosh darn it, I really wish I got that card. But again, nice balance there I find between control and randomness. Also, something that I do not like too much about deck building games when they get to create super convoluted chains of combos. And here, somehow you have that. You have some really interesting combos and chains of effects, but somehow to me it works. I think maybe it is because they feel thematic. Say in Dominion, you found those things, you play that card that gives that effect and gives you those extra things, but clearly it's completely thematically irrelevant. It's trivial, you're just chaining of effects. Here, you're of course creating effects that allow you to exploit more effects and magnify the effect of those effects, etc. But somehow it's tailored to the theme in such a way that I am doing it for the ludic advantages, but I'm also seeing the actions. I'm also seeing my wizard charging the staff to be able then to discharge a powerful, Death Star type of attack. I'm seeing the cleric using an attack and then be able to restore energy from somewhere else and move it somewhere else. I'm seeing the strong warrior with the double axes throwing an axe and then charging an attack with the other axe and taunting an opponent, etc., etc., etc. I find here that there is a very strong connection between the theme and the mechanics, which makes finding and performing the combos fun while also interesting from the ludic point of view and the thematic point of view. So I'm having all the fun that I have in games where I'm creating my combos, while at the same time being able to enjoy that without sacrificing the thematic, the narrative element. I really see, and to me this is one of the differences between Mistfall and Killforth, that I really had the sense that the theme was always there, the story was always there. And then you have a variety of encounters, although at the core the idea is waves of monsters are coming at you and you're killing them. The encounters that will determine the order in which they arrive, how many arrive, the parameters that you need to meet for a certain encounter to end. All those elements give each encounter a certain personality, a certain architecture, and give variety. Again, to me, it took me almost a while to realize how repetitive the game was mechanically, because then from the point of view of the experience of the activities that I was performing, I was having fun fighting off these monsters in what really appeared, what felt like a different sequence, a different range of encounters. So absolutely great. Now there is an element of the game that may not sit well in all groups, which is the fact that when you're playing multiplayer, the game does feel to an extent a little bit of a multiplayer solo, which does not have to be a bad thing, but again, for some people it might be. Now, the game is cooperative, and when the players start playing well, when they get to know their characters, they will try to exploit their deck as much as they can, find ways of creating strong synergies with the cards that they have, and playing ahead about the new synergies that they will get as they build their decks. That means, however, that from the practical point of view, as I'm playing my turn, I'm seeing you sitting on the other side of the table with a character that I may not know very well, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and I have, quote unquote, to trust you. I don't really get to understand or to know exactly what you're doing down to the smallest details. You tell me, okay, I'm playing this card, which gives me a +1. Let me take this other card from the deck. I'll place it here. That charges the card, gives me a +3. I can also break the armor of that card to remove this other card from here. And then you tell me, by the way, that means I just threw a butt-kicking fireball and destroy 3 enemies and supported you. I'm like, oh, great, great. I'm happy to see the result. I'm great to see the effect. And then I'm seeing the archer doing some other similar alchemy of things that results in this or that action. In that sense, there is an element to multiplayer solo because I have no reason for, no incentive to, and no possibility of really understanding what the heck you're doing. I'm trusting you. And again, what is the disadvantage? In a certain sense, there is an element of disconnection. Although, if the players want, they can create a connection again when it comes to the resulting actions. The archer may say, oh, anybody needs support. The colleague may say, okay, who needs to heal? Whom do I need to heal? And then the players get to enjoy the benefit of that action, even though they may not exactly understand all that's going on between a player and his or her deck. So in that sense, you can still have interaction, although again, you have to trust what the players do. And a drawback may be that you're playing for an hour before you realize that one of the players is doing something wrong. And of course, since again, everybody's policing their own deck, it's a little harder to catch that. And well, you have to deal with that element. Again, another thing may be that players will feel disconnected. Well, I really want to know what you're doing there. I don't feel like I'm fully involved in the experience if I just had to take people on their word about what they're doing behind the scenes, behind the effects. On the other hand, this can be a huge advantage if you have alpha player problems in your group. In some cooperative games, you have the experienced player who is a pain in the neck to everybody, just telling everybody what to do. I think it's going to be very tough for an alpha player to manage every card and to tell everybody what to do, what cards to get, what cards to add to their deck, how to create their synergies, etc., etc., etc. So, although players can play with their decks face up and their hands face up, the sheer amount of information to be processed, which includes, of course, the cards still in the deck and the cards that are face up, is such that I think it will prevent any player to jump in and try to micromanage everybody's game. So there is that advantage. Again, from the point of view of gameplay, games like, say, Pandemic, I feel not just connected to the actions the players are taking. Oh, great, he cured me. Oh, great, he removed that element, but I can discuss the strategy with other people. I don't get the sense that in Mistfall you can really get and discuss the strategy with other people, again, because each player has such a unique deck, such a unique set of possible synergies, that I'm not gonna tell the clique, well, are you sure you want to use that card and that card? Why don't you wait for that other card to come out of your deck, etc., etc., etc. So, on one hand, you're not gonna get to decide collectively about every step of the strategy. I guess that you have to think about, again, thematically. I'm asking for the cleric, I'm asking the cleric for the type of effect that I would want. I'm asking the wizard, can you do this? And then I'll leave it to them to figure out how to perform that. So in that sense, it's a type of interaction which, again, feels a little superficial, but also feels thematic. And again, it has the effect of preventing the alpha player game. But if you want to see all the moving parts of a design, then Mistfall may not be for you, because they're just an element, again, of the design that will be left to the individual players. And in that sense, it feels a little bit like a multiplayer solo. In general, I really, really enjoyed Mistfall. I think the art is absolutely pleasant. It's not as good as that of Gloom of Guildford, but no art is as good as that in that game. On the other hand, here you have a game that's still very pleasant from the point of view of the art, and is very solid and very engaging from the point of view of the functioning. The rulebook and the player aids could do a better job of easing you into the design, but if you're willing to put in some work and to go through the learning curve, the game is actually very, very, again, it feels very organic, very fluid once you get used to it. And once that happens, then you have a game that does tell you stories, does create a sense of fantasy quest, of exploration, of adventure, of mystery and wonder, etc., etc., etc. All of the elements that I like in a fantasy quest game with a very solid ludic engine, with a very solid system of interactions, of rules and game effects, all of which also are perfectly connected to the theme. I didn't feel as I was creating those combos that I was losing sight of the theme, but actually that the theme was coming to life in more detail, more vividly through those game interactions, which is precisely what I'm looking for in a game that has a strong theme and also that has a design with, yes, complexity and many moving parts. I want those moving parts to work together with the theme, and this is precisely what I found in Mistfall. Very excited, very happy with this game. The game has a sequel, and in a couple of days I'm leaving home. I'm going to visit my parents in Italy. I'm definitely gonna bring the sequel of Mistfall with me, because at least the first Mistfall works so well as a solitaire game that I think that I'm gonna have fun playing the sequel when I'm in Italy. I don't have my gaming group, or say groups, there with me, so I'm always bringing some solitaire games with me. And I think that the new Mistfall, if it is anything like the original game, is gonna be a fun experience to play for the solitaire player, for the traveling players. In general, Mistfall, highly recommended to anybody who enjoys cooperative games, fantasy quest games, and thematic games in general. Try to get past the apparent fiddliness of the rules, and you will find a game that is definitely fun, enjoyable, and strongly thematic.